In the previous lesson, I showed you how to create simple NodeJS modules. In this video, I created data and service modules of the application. Let's start with the data module. First, move the movies.json file to the data folder. This way, all data-related files will be inside that folder. Create a new JavaScript file inside the data folder. Call it inmemory.js. This way, I know that the data source is populated from the movies.json file. Okay, now this module has to expose the operations to modify the data. Start by adding the module.exports function to be exposed. First, a function to get all the movies. This function receives no parameters and returns the summary of movies, and for now, leave the body of the functions empty. Next, a function to get a particular movie. This function receives the ID of the movie and returns the stored object. Now, a function to add a movie. This function receives the movie object to be added and returns the movie added to the collection. Then, a function to update a movie store. This function receives the ID of the movie to be modified and the movie object that has all the updated info. It returns the object updated in the collection. Finally, a function to remove a movie. This function receives the ID of the movie to delete. Now that you have the functions you want to expose as part of your module, it's time to move the data-related code from the server to this module. In my case, I store all the movies in an object where movies are stored by IDs. At the top of the file, add a require to load all the movies from the JSON file. Then, create the movies by ID object to store the movies once indexed. Then create a current ID variable to keep the count of the IDs. This variable increments each time I add a new movie. Now, in a for each loop, I take the raw movies I loaded from the JSON and add them to the movies ID collection. Now I can start to implement all the exported functions. I begin with the hardest one, which is returning all the movies as a summary. I got the code from the old server.js file that I completed as part of the assignment for the first week, and I will just copy paste it in place and verify it's okay. The code iterates the properties inside the movies by ID object. This is done to iterate the collection. I get the movie object from the collection, and then push to the summary collection the summarized object, which is a copy of the original but averages the score and counts the number of reviews per each movie. The get function is very straightforward. Just return the movies by ID object in the ID position. The add function is similar to the for each at the top of the file. In fact, I can copy all of it and return the movie object. In the update function, I need to check that the ID is valid and that a movie exists in that ID. Then just simply set the ID to the new movie object and replace the movie inside that collection. Return the supplied movie object. The delete function is similar to the update. Check that the ID is valid, then get the movie with that ID, and delete the element in the collection using the delete movies by ID. Finally, return the movie object deleted. Okay, the data module is done. Now for the service module. Create a new JavaScript file in the services folder and name it restserver.js. In that file, require express and body parser. And create a start function that receives the configuration and data source. I use the parameters config and data. The idea here is to create and initialize the server inside this function. Here I have access to the configuration variables like the port to use and the data module provided externally. Okay, now the code inside the function will resemble what I have in the original server, but now I have to modify how data is obtained in this version since I am using the external module. It is easier than it sounds, trust me. First, leave the app declaration and use app use bodyparser.json statements. Then the get slash function just returns the stringified data.getAll. Since all the data processing is done in the data module, I just need to use data.getAll function directly to get the summary. Now, with the get slash movie ID function, I still need to parse the ID from the path parameters, no change here, and then get the movie from the data directly. Then, if the movie exists, this is done with a simple if movie, then I return the movie. If the movie does not exist, then I return the 404 not found. To add a movie using post/ method, I just need to invoke the data.add method with the request body parse JSON object. Then write to the response the movie that I get from the data.add call. For the put method in /movieID, I also need ID parsing. Then a simple call to the update method in the data module does the trick. I provide the ID and request body as parameters to this method. And then the delete /movieID method requires me parsing the ID as well. Then get the deleted movie using data.delete with the ID. And if the movie was deleted, then the returned movie should exist. In this case, I return that movie object. If the movie did not exist, then I return a 404 not found. Finally, the server should start with a simple app.listen. Instead of using the port variable, I use the one in the configuration using config.server.port. Go through the code and remove any unnecessary code. There are some text editors that can make it easier to locate potential errors, but in my case, I simply try to run the server after each change and check it was working. Then I make a small change, restart the server, and try again. It's a little try and error, but that's one way to do it. Okay. Now I have to expose the start function because the way I declare it in the script, it won't be visible from the outside. To expose it, I add the module.exports using module.exports.start equals start. Go back to the server.js file in the top folder of my project. And now I can remove the old code. My server is now 4 lines of code, 5 if you count the white line. And my data and server is separated. As I continue writing code, I can modify modules and keep the data logic separated from the HTTP server. Try it on your project. Remember to make a backup copy that can help you roll back in just in case. When you're ready to proceed, watch the next video where you will learn about RESTful application structure.